Oh, hey everybody. Welcome to Comic Book News. I'm Dan Sheen. I don't know what just happened there. I was having major technical glitches. That's kind of been a theme lately on this show. Ross, can you hear me back there? Just nod your head. I can see you. Can you hear me? Everything's okay? Yeah, great. Okay. I just blew the whole thing. I'm sorry because I had a real fun thing. My guest tonight, oh man, you know him as the richest boy in the world. He lives in a house made of diamonds. He's got a robot maid and a genetically altered Dalmatian. Wait a minute. Wait a second. I got the wrong notes. No. Ross Richie. That's right. Ross Richie. He's the CEO and founder of Boom Studios. He's the 9-time Diamond Comics Distributors Publisher of the Year Award. He's got multiple Harvey Eisner GLAAD Awards, 5-time New York Times bestseller. This guy knows what's going on in the comics industry today. He's got properties that are out there, right, in media. We got movies in production. We got TV shows in production. But does that mean he's forgotten his roots in the direct market? That's not what I hear. I hear that Boom is one of the most retail-friendly publishers out there right now, really still focused on that, what are we going to call it, that crucible that is the direct market, that really can help pick the winners that can go further in a broader market. So without further ado, I want to bring in Ross Richie. And Ross, welcome to Comic Book News.
Howdy. Thanks for having me.
Dude, sorry for the gimmicky intro and the crazy technical glitches. I'm not even sure how much of the intro happened.
I know this is not the first time that someone has compared my name to Richie Rich, but I would make a different comparison. I would go more, Ross Richie is more Clark Kent, Peter Parker, or maybe I'd go deep cut Marvel Comics and go Rich Rider, that we all know. Nova, yes, the original Nova, not the new kid.
Yeah, okay.
But Richie, Rich Rider, so that's what I got. It's not good, but it's what I came up with. So
I could have said like you were the descendant of Thunderbolt Ross. There's so many ways.
Except the part that's my first name, not my last name.
Dude, you don't have to call me out on my just blatant mistakes right here on live YouTube. Well, all right, you can do that. That's okay. That's what this show's all about, Ross. It's about making mistakes.
What I have to fess up on is I love your virtual background so much, and all I can do is just look at that copy of Creepy that's up there with the yellow cover, And it's one of my favorites because it's the sort of horror baseball story where the guy's throwing a grenade. And it's just, yes, exactly. And it's just so magical, amazing, and incredible. And it just makes me happy. And, I always loved that DC Comics in the 70s had the strange sports stories where they were like science fiction mixed with sports. And then Warren had those crazy horror sports stories where they would mix, killer robots in with their football. So
it seems like we lost that stuff kind of for a while in the 90s, but it came roaring back. I mean, look at the content coming from Boom alone, let alone Image or any of your other indie ilk out there. Like, we've got that breadth of genres, I think, back in the comic shops. Would you agree with that, or how would you compare it to, the golden age that you're kind of talking about back then?
Well, I think that there's been a widening and broadening of different genres across all comic book publishing, and it's really kicked in the past 10, 15 years. I think that's true.
And I mean, obviously it's been a good thing, I would think, but do you think it's inevitable? Do you think the comics industry, it's still so heavily dominated by one genre? We know what that genre is. Do you find that a limiting factor? Do you think that's a limiting factor for growth in like comic shops, or has been the perception that is what is defined by comic books? Comic books, too many are still defined by a single genre.
Well, I think that the world is changing, and I grew up with superhero comics. I'm a huge current collector. I still buy back issues. If you saw my garage, your head would explode. It makes my wife's head explode. So I'm not in any way denigrating superheroes. I love them. I just read a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #4 to my 6-year-old and 8-year-old daughter this morning, which is the first Doc Ock. But I was having a conversation with Paul Levitz, who is, kind of a mentor to me. And Paul ran DC Comics for 30, 35 years. And we were talking about Raina Telgemeier. And Raina Telgemeier's publishing, you and I were having this conversation maybe 10 years ago. And so the numbers are going to be 10-year-ago numbers because they've only grown since then.
Yes.
But at the time, Drama had sold 1 million copies. And Paul estimated that there were 500,000 people shopping in comic shops. And so if you put those two aggregate numbers together, 2/3 of the readership, when we did that calculation, were junior high girls, because that's who's reading Drama. And that's not to say that guys don't read Drama, or older women, or my 8-year-old's actually read it, so she's not in junior high. But roughly speaking, 2/3 of the audience at that time, and the audience has only grown. And you see these New York book publishers are jumping into kids publishing. Scholastic is ramping up kids publishing. I've forgotten there was a major New York book publisher that just announced that today that they are doing a whole program of graphic novels that are designed to teach kids how to read graphic novels at a very early age.
Excellent.
And so they're onboarding them, as they're learning to read at the age of 5 or 6. And we're going to have storylines and characters and product that's going to migrate you up from the age of 5 all the way to 85.
Yes.
And so the proliferation of content, you see there's great successful publishers like First Second that, don't ever get anywhere close to genre material. And, there's just a wide variety of publishing that's happening. And I think the direct market is near and dear to my heart, and they're my people. And, it's a center for our business, and it's super important, but we're also distributed by Simon & Schuster to the book market. And I think that when we think of the comic book market, we think of it within the paradigm of Marvel and DC, but I don't think it exists only there anymore.
Right.
I think Marvel and DC are vital, and I think they're incredible companies, and they do amazing magical stuff. But there's a huge ecosystem now, and it is really big, and it's only going to grow. When you see these New York book publishers, when all of them start publishing into it,
Yes.
that means that that's one of the biggest growth categories in books, period. Not that's one of the biggest growth categories for youth or for YA, for millennials, blah, blah. No. It's one of the biggest growth categories in publishing.
I want to. It's not only one of the biggest; it's like one of the only growth categories in print. You know what I mean? Like it is really blowing up at a time when much of the rest of that industry is contracting. So we're seeing a flow. I'm seeing graphic novels being published from publishers I never expected them to be. I'm seeing great cartoonists jump ship from their traditional cartoonist publishers even and sort of leveling up into the New York publishing world. Guys like Joe Sacco's new book, or I don't know who published Gene Yang's Dragon Hoops. I can't see the publisher. Have you read that one, by the way?
Not yet. I'm a big fan.
It's a knockout, Ross. That book. I mean, it's one of the best graphic novels I've read, and I can't remember how long. I read a lot of them. It's really that good. Anyway, not to digress into other people's books. Let's talk about Boom for a little bit. Let's talk about your journey to get there. Talk about Malibu Comics and tell us how you got into this publishing of comics thing.
Well, I moved to Los Angeles from Austin. Went to school in Austin, and I was a film major. I went out to LA to work in the movie business, and I ran around as a freelancer production assistant and did some work. And then I had to start living on my credit cards, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the life of freelance was not for me. It was too unpredictable for my taste. So I went to a comic book convention, and I had been a lifelong comic book fan. My first comic book was a Jack Kirby Captain America comic that I got in an Easter basket in the 70s. And I had just become an ardent comic book collector ever since then. And so I go to this convention, and I end up in a conversation with a guy at the Malibu Comics booth. And for folks that don't know, Malibu published a series of superhero comics called the Ultraverse. Some people might know that. But there was this MMA guy who was dressed up as one of their characters, and they had a video that they had shot where he was the character Hardcase and was fighting. And I said to the guy at the booth, I was like, wow, I'm a film school kid, and I can see that you shot that on 35 millimeter, which is expensive and technically difficult. And you didn't shoot it on 16 millimeter. And the guy standing at the booth was like, how can you tell the difference? And I didn't know it, but he was the director of the film. And so we struck up a conversation, and lo and behold, Malibu ends up offering me a job, and I need a job. So I thought, well, I'll pay some bills, I'll get back on my feet, and then I'll transition back to why I moved out to Los Angeles, which was to work in the movie business. And I went on an incredible journey. This was a really special time when Malibu was publishing, Jim Starlin and Barry Windsor Smith and Gil Kane. And I got to know the heroes of my youth, Walter Simonson, Howard Chaykin, Kevin McGuire, Steve Englehart. I mean, the list of Hall of Famers that they published was staggering. And I learned the comic book business from the inside out. And I went to the 20th reunion of Malibu, and it was a closed-door affair that was only the staff. And the editor-in-chief, Chris Olm, said, Ross, I never liked having you as an employee. And I said, why is that, Chris? And he said, well, I would ask Mike to do something, and he'd go do it. And then I'd ask you to go do something, and you'd say, that's really interesting. Why do you want me to do that? And what I didn't know was at the time I was asking questions about how you publish and why you do certain things with publishing, which all informed me starting Boom later. But anyway, Marvel buys Malibu, and I decide that it's not for me. And so I transitioned back to the movie business, and long story short, through a series of events, I become a script reader for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh. And so if you know, if you're curious why Arnold Schwarzenegger needs somebody to read his scripts, it's a universal. Yeah, it's a universal in the entertainment business. The talent agencies get more screenplays than they can possibly.
Yeah, of course.
And so they have people that go through and read them and determine what's worth evaluating and what's worth people's time. So, anyway,
I'm trying to think what era of movies that of Schwarzenegger movies.
Oh, I can tell you exactly what it is. It's the late Schwarzenegger period, so it's like End of Days. So, it's kind of an interesting. You might get a kick out of this. This might be worth a 2-minute conversation. So, like, it's Collateral, End of Days. It's that kind of stuff. But like, what was happening in the business at the time was the tentpole was emerging as like a cinematic concept, and the studios were programming their slates around the idea of a tentpole. And that was a big transition time period because typically they would just develop. And when things were good, then they would make it. And they just developed a ton of stuff and they just counted on the fact that the best would rise to the top. Well, now they were trying to go, well, we need a summer movie. Well, what's a summer movie? Well, it could be a comedy like, a Jim Carrey movie. It could be a rom-com with Sandra Bullock, or it could be an action film, right? And so they programmed the End of Days. Basically, I think it was, I forgot the screenwriter's name, came in and said, for the pitch, said, I don't have the script and I don't have the story, but what I have is the movie poster. And he didn't actually generate it, but he was like, the movie poster is Arnold versus the Devil. And Warner's at that point decided, okay, that's our summer movie. And we're going to go make that. And they were always trying to get a script finished in time to get a movie made. And it never quite.
Yeah, right.
And so each draft would come in and they would have me compare it to what was written 2 weeks before. And it was like, what are the changes? And, give me the executive summary so that I can just at a glance understand, has it gotten better or has it gotten worse? So it was that was the sort of life of the script reader. But through that process, I started to get to know and maintain relationships with a large number of comic book creators. And the phone rang one day, and I had gotten to know Keith Giffen. Keith had called me, and he did a comic book at Image called Trencher.
Yes.
And Mel Gibson was optioning it. And he called me up to ask, is this deal that I'm getting offered, is it good or is it bad? And I said, Keith, it's not a great deal, but it's not a bad deal. And I kind of walked him through that, and I got to know Keith. And some time goes by, we're friends for maybe a year or two, and then Keith calls me up and he says, I'm going to do a comic book at Image, I'm going to draw it, and you're going to write it. And I said, well, Keith, that sounds great, but the only problem with the plan is I'm not a writer. And Keith said, I'm going to draw a comic book and you're going to write it. And I said, Keith, I don't think you're listening to me. I'm not a writer. And my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, is a screenwriter. So I know a writer when I read one. And I'm not a writer. And Keith said, look, I'm doing this comic at Image, and you're going to write it. And I said, okay, this is a dream come true. One of my favorite creators of all time, a personal friend, is calling me up and offering me an opportunity to write a comic book. So I'm not going to tell him no again, Keith, but I'm going to make you a deal. And the deal is, I am not going to do a good job on this. When I suck, you need to rewrite me to make the story work, and know that I am doing the best that I can, and you're not going to step on my creative toes. And if anything, having you come in and fix it to save both of our faces will be, a huge relief, because I know that this is bigger than me. So
all of this kind of surprises me a little bit, just because Keith Giffen is such an accomplished writer himself. Like, why he didn't want to just fully do it himself? Like, he's written so many great comics.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about Keith. This kind of probably hasn't clicked for you, but once I point it out, it'll click in retrospect. Keith is an ardent collaborator. So Keith loves to push off of other ideas. And so when you go back and you look at Ambush Bug, he drew it and he co-wrote it, but he co-wrote it with Robert Warren Fleming.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Jan DeMatteis on the Justice League. So, and for a fun little story, the first thing I published through Boom, I'm going to skip the part of we did the image series and then Keith basically talked me into starting Boom. Okay. So that's 2005. And he said, you should publish, which I thought he was crazy. Now, the first book that we did was Hero Squared, which was written by Keith and Dan DeMatteis. Okay. And I learned firsthand how they did the Justice League comics because I was the editor and publisher of the next Giffen DeMatteis collaboration. And here's the crazy, this is so nuts. Okay. And it's these two guys, how they work is they'll get on the phone, they'll talk back and forth, they'll crack each other up. Okay. They have a very special friendship that has this amazing chemistry. Okay. And then Keith will put the phone down and go write the plot, and it will be nothing of what they talked about.
Huh.
And part of that is, Keith is a prankster and he's an instigator. Okay. And so he does it to try to spark something from DeMatteis. What Keith considers it is he's playing jazz, right? So he'll take the thematic idea, but then he'll play it a different way. And then what happens is he kicks it over to Mark, JM goes by Mark, kicks over to Mark. Mark then, let me back up. The plot goes to the artist draws it. The pages go to Mark, and Mark doesn't read Keith's plot.
Whoa.
Right. And so he looks at the pages for the first time.
Yeah.
And then he writes the story that he wants to write in the word balloons. And then the book gets published, and then Keith doesn't read it. So
that's the cherry on the absurd sundae. That is this modified Marvel process that's going on there, right? Like
yes.
And I'm going to say that team is one of the most underrated, like just like creative powerhouses. The stuff the fact that they were able to publish the Justice League that they published, to me, is still amazing. Like you could get away with a wacky Justice League in that era of all eras.
I'm going to amuse and probably outrage part of your audience, but I believe, I do not know, I have not had these conversations, I cannot state emphatically, but when I read Brian Michael Bendis's dialogue, I think his dialogue style is massively influenced by those guys.
I don't think I've ever made that connection before, but immediately I do. I mean, the naturalistic back and forth. Everybody says David Mamet for sure, but who's his comic influence? It's Giffen DeMatteis.
Yep.
How far down the rabbit hole did we just go, Ross? I don't even know. But I love it. I love it.
And Dan, before we move on, I do want to point out not just the dialogue for sure, but also I think the way that those two guys bounced characters that were very different off of each other.
Yeah.
Which I think Brian does really well. I mean, Brian's a genius, so I'm in no way diminishing his talent, but that's just a major influence that I see.
You're making a great point to me. Yeah, the Batman and Guy Gardner dynamic, the Booster Blue Beetle dynamic was, all of that stuff. That was what that book was all about. And then just like it all comes together, the synthesis when you get like an Adam Hughes in there, or the amazing teams that they had working on those books.
So some of my favorite comics ever. I think they were geniuses. So anyway, so basically Keith talks me into starting Boom. And at that juncture, I know enough about publishing to know that it's very dangerous and costly, and mistakes can make you lose, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I have a great amount of fear. But I said to Keith, look, if you want me to start publishing, you're going to have to come up with the first slate of books, because I know people are going to buy it because it's a Keith Giffen comic, because they don't know who Boom is. So if you ever look at like the first 6 months to a year of Boom's publishing, like every single issue is Keith Giffen, because it's like, okay,
yeah, right. I don't, I had a comic store during that time, Ross, like when Boom came out, and I was like, honestly, first reaction whenever one of these new publishers comes out is like, this is the last thing I need, is another publisher with a whole slate of books that usually are like from people I've never heard of, and her concepts don't seem that like geared towards what I could sell. Boom, right out of the gate, when you come at me with those names that are so well known and established in the direct market, that gave you a big leg up over many of the other people who have, they have a lot to prove. Just to get that first copy sold into a comic book store, you had sort of overcome something there.
Well, it's all Keith's fault. So that's Keith wanted me to do it, and he was the guy that got us kicked off and got us rolling. But that's how we got publishing, and it was a pretty crazy. I'm sort of the guy that jumps in and figures it out as he goes along. So I certainly didn't know what I was getting into, the degree to which we are now. So
in that 15 years since the launch of Boom, 9-time Diamond Publisher of the Year award. That's what it says here anyway. But who votes on that? Who decides that? Who makes that decision?
That's retailers, I believe.
So
I could be wrong, but yeah.
I believe that's voted on, and Diamond. I think you're right. I don't know anymore. I was since that time, 9 out of 15, I'm going to say, is not bad, Ross. And I'm going to say I saw a lot of other companies come and go in that time. And there's still a lot out there. I'm amazed when I look into previews these days, when I dare to venture into what is the previews. I just go, what a mind-boggling array of things to choose from now. But so many times it boils down to like, I've never heard of these creators. And it's almost like in the movies where it's the movie star, right? Or in Marvel or DC, it's the character. Anywhere else, when you're talking about like selling into the direct market, it really is about the creators. So what's the approach at Boom? What's Boom's approach towards like creator ownership and creator? I don't really know that much about Boom's philosophy in that regard, and what your feelings on that are.
Well, I mean, I think that we're not anything without our creators. And, when you look at our slate, we have, big licenses that we do, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. But then we do big creator-owned books like Once and Future and Something is Killing the Children. And, Something is Killing the Children has been completely insane. I don't know if you've been tracking this, but the 11th issue outsold the first issue.
That's something special,
right?
That's very rare, and that's an amazing. I mean, unless, wait a minute, did you have 11 variant covers with an Alex Ross and a Peach Momoko and a whatever on that issue? Okay, but I mean that's on all of the issues you have variant covers, I'm assuming.
Actually, it might have been 4. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think
so. How do you factor that in? Do you guys look at that? Let me ask you. Let me put that topic out there since we're talking about it. How do you factor in, like, how do you balance, like, what is the true demand versus the collector demand? Do you care? How much do you care that you're selling the same story to this multiple times to the same person versus expanding? And I'm not accusing you guys of being the worst or anything of this. I'm just saying, what's your feeling about that?
Well, I think it's a multi-dimensional thing. So I think that, there are people like my friend Brian Hibbs, who is a vocal critic and says that comic books are for reading, and that is the only purpose that they have. And that everybody should be reading comics, and anybody that's fostering the collecting of comics is the enemy. And he's very clear about that. And I understand his perspective. And he lived through the crash in the 90s, and it was very a negative experience. And his stripes are earned. And I have nothing but love and affection for Brian. And I think that obviously readership is what you want to foster, number one. But at the same time, I've been branching out a lot more in social media, and I've gotten really active on Instagram in the past 2 months. And I encourage your audience to come follow me on Instagram.
Check those links, people.
I hope that I am able to provide things that will be worth checking out. But as I have really ramped up my Instagram activity, one of the things that I was really amazed by is to see that there's a whole new generation of fans. And I think they're very recent to the medium, like within the past 2 to 5 years. And they're really aggressive collectors.
Yes.
And when I say that, I don't mean speculators, and I don't mean like deep back issue collectors. There definitely is a huge resurgence in back issues that we've all seen in the market.
Yes.
But what I mean is, I'll see posts from housewives that they are going out and buying cover price different variants of the same issue because it's a way to show their fandom. And they're not investing. They don't look at it as I'm paying $4 for this and I'm going to sell it for $10 on eBay. They look at it like, I love this. And here's another expression of something. I have every issue and I want to spend more money on my fandom. And I don't have an ability to do that other than to buy a variant. And so there's that kind of a fan, which I think is a real thing. Like I've been quite blown away to discover this fandom. And I think it's really cool. It's very enthusiastic. They share a lot on social media. They're looking for their tribe to help celebrate their fandom. And the folks that want to talk about the series and want to learn more about it. And I've been trying to, you and I had gone back and forth on email about, I've started this YouTube show that's the design. And speaking of once and future, I just put up an episode with Kieran Gillen as the guy that I'm interviewing. And before that, I did Tynan, James Tynan IV, who co-created Something is Killing the Children. And what I'm realizing is there's this new fandom that they don't know anything. And I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean is they don't have 10,000 hours of creator interviews under their belt. And they don't know a lot of things. And I know that because they go onto my Instagram and they ask me. And they say, I don't understand this and I don't understand that. And how does this work? And how does that work? And I think what we're not hip to right now is that we're onboarding a tremendous number of new fans. And so part of my spirit with my videos is to talk about the business in a long form interview that's super detailed. It's so detailed, Dan, it's to the point where I know I'm going to lose like half the audience, right? Because they're going to be that patient, right? But it's a resource that I'm putting up on the web that I know will be there for years. So that if you're aspiring to be a writer or you're aspiring to be an artist or you're a retailer that wants to know more about how the sausage is made, or you're a super fan, like whatever, it's there to be able to talk about. I mean, in one of the videos, James Tynan breaks down how he came up with Punchline, which is like the biggest story of the year, right? And he breaks it down in real specific detail. I was actually pretty blown away about how much he showed how he did the magic trick. And that sort of thing, I think, has value long-term creatively for other people to understand how the character was designed and understand how the character was conceptualized. And, it's great for the community all the way down the line. That's my aim, at least. That's what I believe that I'm doing. And that's why I'm doing it. And so I just think that the more that we can look at these fans, recognize who they are, meet them for their fandom and where their fandom exists, the better off it is. Now, look, here's the thing. There's a million of these guys. Like, we did a bunch of printings on Something is Killing the Children and What's the Future. And some of them got ordered and some of them didn't get ordered very heavily. Okay. And we were trying to catch up to demand. And like, I want to say the first printing of Something is Killing the Children was like around 35,000 copies. And we, through a bunch of subsequent printings, got way over 50 and we're approaching 80 now. And so there's a bunch
which is top tier comic issue territory, really, at this point, for any even of the big two. A lot of their books, they would love to get those kind of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I'm way out over my ski tips, and so I'm not trying to say a bunch of stuff. I have the statistics in front of me, but I think like Undiscovered Country, which was Image's biggest book last year, was around 75, and we're, with Something is Killing through subsequent printings are over 80, and so. It's as far as like large, there's some version of saying it's the largest creator-owned book launched last year. I think that's correct, but maybe somebody else, maybe Undiscovered had a bunch of retailer variants that I don't know about. But anyway, it's a big launch. Who cares about who's number one? That's not what's important.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you heard it here first, folks. Ross Richie says, Eric Stevenson, hey, forget it, pal. We're number. No, just kidding.
So let me say, because that will all get misinterpreted. So let me say, for the comment section, Image is a great company, and I'm friends with the partners, many of the partners that founded the company, and I have nothing but respect for them. It's a great company. So anyway, but I think that there are collectors that are people that they buy comics that they love and they put them in their collection. They have no intention of selling them, and they buy multiple copies. And then there are people that buy them to speculate, and they go to resell, right? And then there's your good old reader. And so when we do different variants, what we worry about is how do we do a variant if we're paying attention to the audience? How will they care? Why would they care about this?
Right.
Like we've all been a consumer that, like, when you heard a song that was written to be a hit and it just doesn't have any life to it. Right. And you sit there and you go, oh, those guys are trying to make money. Right. So when you do creative things, the other way to express it is we've all tasted an amazing meal and said, this is incredible. Why does this taste so good? And the answer was it was made with love. Now, that's a crazy idea, right? Like, the ingredients are the same, but it came out better. Why? It was made with love. It's a phrase because it's true, right? And so it's like, if we're going to create different expressions for fans that want to buy them, how do we create those expressions in such a way that that fan looks at it and goes, this is amazing, and I love this, and this was made for me?
So I am totally on board with that, Ross. I don't have a problem. In fact, I say the more covers somebody wants to buy, you're servicing that market if you make it something that a retailer can just simply order and get and buy. It's when we get into these incentive variants and 200 and match your order to some previous order of a zillion, a million, zillion. I don't know. Actually, I don't follow that specifically. I'm not sure what your incentive policies or what the strategy behind your variants are. And I'm not going to judge you for what they are. What I'm going to say is what I get is I had other retailers reach out to me to say, like Regan Clem, a longtime watcher and supporter of this show of Summit Comics and Games in Lansing, Michigan. He reached out to me to say that you guys are one of the most direct market, retailer friendly companies out there.
Thank you.
One of the things he pointed to was your Kickstarter. Oh, first of all, you're ushering in of returnability, starting with once and future. Tell us a little bit about the boom, returnability boom, and what you're trying to do with that.
Well, we had this book, Once a Future, coming out from Kieran Gillen, and Kieran is one of the most commercial comic book writers in the business. And Kieran had had a massive hit with Wicked and the Vine, and he was following it up at Image with a book called Die. And it had come out about 18 months before Once and Future. And we were very excited about Once and Future, and we were very proud of it, and we really believed in it. And what we decided to do was we felt that retailers could order that book as aggressively as they had ordered Die from Image. But a Boom original had not sold, didn't have history in the market as selling as well as that. So if you're a retailer, you're sitting there going, if I order this book, there's no Boom book that's ever sold as big as Die number one.
Right.
Will the audience accept, will Kieran Gillen's, name at Image be the same thing as Kieran Gillen's name at Boom? And so we thought about, well, how do we take away the barrier to ordering the book? And returnability was the barrier, where it was like, order this book like you ordered Die, and we believe it could sell to somebody who reads Die. They're different projects, right? Conceptually they're very different. But if you like Kieran Gillen, sell this to your Kieran Gillen fans, and I think they can buy it and read it, and I think it'll hold up. And we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to make it returnable. And if you buy it and it doesn't sell, send it back. Real simple. And the book, went through the stratosphere. I mean, we're over 50,000 copies on that.
So the goal was to get it into stores, just like as you get it into more stores, more people will get to see it. And if people see it, they're going to buy it because it's good, right? And how do I know that, though? I know that because this is one of the few books that had word of mouth this year enough, and that had copies available on the shelves at my local comic shop in a small rural town, that I was able to pick it up, and I was able to look at it, and I was able to review it this year. And you can check out my review, but we can also, while we're talking about it, we can also take a look at it, Ross. Where? In the $1 Million Comics Cam, of course. So we'll take a look. While you're talking about it, tell us a little bit more about the Once and Future story. Tell us about, we know you made it returnable, but that's not enough, man. Just saying like you can send this thing back is not enough. Tell me what was special about this story to you, and why you think it did so well.
Well, the artist Dan Mora, I think, is somebody who's really special. He's a brilliant storyteller and a great draftsman. And he had done the first arc for us, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and had built up, he was really at a critical mass point where he was building a lot of fandom. And we paired Dan with Kieran for this project. And, Kieran is an Englishman. And so when the title of the series is called Once and Future, you know that that's a King Arthur reference. And what Kieran has done really brilliantly is he's created a real spin on the original King Arthur idea. And so basically you meet Duncan here. You can see him in the top left of the screen. He's a younger guy. He's out on a date with a beautiful woman. He spills wine on her. He completely blows it. She's very kind and easy to get along with, and he says all the wrong things and alienates her. And the fun part is you see the bottom left corner there, his phone is ringing, and it's Gran. His grandma calls him up. And his grandma is this hard-smoking, hard-bitten, tough grandmother who does not want to behave in the old folks' home and is giving Duncan some problems. And basically what you discover is that his grandmother is a monster hunter. And she's a brilliant badass. She was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer back in the day. And she basically grabs him by the scruff of the neck and pulls him onto an adventure. And another way to think about this is, what if you discovered as Luke Skywalker that your grandmother was Obi-Wan Kenobi? And so she is one of the most fun parts of the story. There's all these crazy monsters. Here's the questing beast from the Arthurian myths. And there's a group of people that are trying to bring King Arthur back. And the question is when King Arthur comes back, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? And
Yes.
I'm going to reveal more than that, because
that's what I loved about it. That's what hooked me. The ambiguity of that, and the addition of like sort of the like right-wing nationalist politics of the day, and sort of tying it all in together makes it feel super current and now, but with a throwback to something timeless, but with a, did we ever really think about Arthurian legend the correct way? Was it maybe misinterpreted the whole time? I really enjoyed that spin on it.
Well, Kieran's one of the best, and I think Dan's one of the best, and putting them together and having them do their thing. I think Gran is one of the greatest characters of the past couple of years. She's absolutely hilarious. She's brilliant, and she's just a whoop-ass female, and I think is incredibly appealing and a lot of fun. And, it was a great way to kick off this new era for Boom. And, the next month we had Something is Killing the Children, and that's turned into a phenomenon. And, with issue 11 outselling issue number 1, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And the big thing that happened for us was when the shutdown happened. It was a pretty traumatic moment. I was curious if comic shops would be capitalized well enough to be able to survive. And what we really decided to do during this time period was back stores. And so we opened up our returnability from first issues to all issues, and we opened it up to the biggest window that anybody had. Like, we made our product returnable, I think, through the summer at the time. And we just knew that we needed to back retailers. If retailers were going to reopen, they needed to know that we had their back. And, with fans coming in, were they going to have the usual traffic, or were they going to have half or a tenth? I mean, it wasn't clear. We know now that stores are up. But coming through that summer, one of the things that happened was Marvel didn't ship product, any. And they were doing what they needed to do to take care of themselves, but it was clear that stores needed more product. And DC really was more graduated and careful. And so they would take like a month's worth of product and spread it out over 6 weeks. And so we were going to the shops, Boom, the employees, the upper guys, Philip Sablik, Matt Gagnon, myself, Stephen Christie, we're going to the shops and noticing that there's not much to sell. And so during that time period, what I knew was James Tynion IV had a graphic novel that he had written, and we had in our pocket that was supposed to come out in November. And I basically called up James and I said, I have a really, really crazy idea. Shops don't have anything to sell right now. What if we take your graphic novel and we don't put it out in November? What if we serialize it first and we break it up into individual issues and make like a 6-issue miniseries out of it, and we put it out in the direct market now? And James is so open to new things. He thought it was a great idea. And what we ended up doing, this is how nuts this is, Dan. You don't understand how crazy I am. You don't understand how sick in the head I am. But I'm going to lay it out to you. When I first told Philip Sablik that I wanted to do this, who's my president of publishing, he told me that I couldn't do it. And I said, why? And he said, there's not enough time to submit the information to Diamond that then gets collated to go into the previous catalog, which then needs to be printed in paper and needs to ship to stores. It needs to be on racks for a month, and then the orders get collated, right? There's not enough time. And he was right. And so I said, well, let's just skip previews.
Final order cutoff, man. That's what it's all about.
That's what we did. We went direct to final order cutoff. But here's the timeline, Dan. This is how nuts this is, okay? We had 5 days to collect orders. So we announced on a Monday, and then we had that whole week, 5 working days. And then the following Monday, it had to FOC.
And what's the title that we're talking about?
Wind. And that's how we published Wind. And the first issue of Wind sold better than Once and Future #1 and Something is Killing the Children #1. And then we followed up Wind with 7 Secrets, Tom Taylor's book. And that first issue sold better than Wind. And then we followed 7 Secrets up with We Only Find Them When We're Dead. And that book sold over 75,000 copies. That book's approaching 100,000 copies now.
I think any publisher needs to focus their social media and their timing and their marketing push around final order cutoff, to tell you the truth. To be like, this is the moment. This is the last date you have to make sure, like this week, tell your retailer to order this thing, because you'll get his attention or her attention. But you only have that window. There's so much jammed into that previews. There's so much info a retailer has to go through. And honestly, what's interesting is many retailers don't even look at the final order cutoff still to this day. But every single one of the best retailers and the successful retailers is focused on that thing like a laser. So like that's the, honestly, when you think about it, I was talking about this with Regan. The direct market was the original crowdfunding because you could get your orders locked in up front before the printing costs have to be established.
Yep.
So tell us how you've taken that model. What Regan pointed me to was your Kickstarter action on the Keanu Reeves book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that and how you're doing it via Kickstarter, but still trying to point people towards comic shops.
Sure. Well, the way that we're using Kickstarter is we're not using Kickstarter to crowdfund. Okay. So in the crowdfund model, you need to raise money from the audience to afford to do the project. What we're doing is we're doing Keanu's series Berserker, and Boom is funding that. And so we've worked with Keanu and assembled the creative team and done it all. And it was designed to be a regular Boom book, just like everything else. It's a 12-issue series. And the length was decided by Keanu and Matt Kent. So that was the format. But what we decided to do was to use Kickstarter as a digital distribution platform. So when you have somebody like Keanu Reeves, like I would go to bed at night and I would think, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Like this is the sort of thing that you dream of, recruiting people to read comics. Like how many Keanu Reeves fans are there? There's millions, if not tens of millions of them. And you can get those people to read a comic book maybe for the first time, or maybe get them to come back to comics if they've left, by showing them this comic book. But how do we get this comic book on their radar? Yes. How do we get somebody who's never been in a comic shop, who's never browsed the graphic novel section in Barnes & Noble, who doesn't go look at graphic novels on Amazon, doesn't read all the sites that we love? How are they going to know it exists? And what I knew was that with Kickstarter, there's one click. And there's also like a timing. Like a Kickstarter, you can order something and it show up much later.
Yes.
Even beyond the typical Amazon window. And so
far beyond it, to the point of ludicrousness and unprofessionalness.
Well, that's a different conversation. But but it was that ordering mechanism was unique. And so I thought, well, what we can do is we can announce this. And if I read TMZ and I love Keanu Reeves and I'm a People magazine kind of person, right? If you announce this, let's say the information goes up on /film or something, and I can click on a link and it takes me to the Kickstarter, I can click on that, I can order it. Everyone knows what Kickstarter is. So there's no like, I don't understand. No, it's real simple. Click, bang, okay? And then I'll get the graphic novel when it ships. And the time period of the disconnect between when you can click and when the product gets shipped to you, in that window, we can ship the book to the direct market And so what I would do when I would talk to retailers about this is I would talk about there's 4 windows to release Berserker. Okay, the first window is serializing an individual comic book in the direct market, just like everything else. So we're going to solicit the first issue. We're going to solicit the second issue. We're going to solicit the third. We're going to solicit the fourth. Those books are all going to ship through the direct market. Okay. Then we collect in 4-issue arcs. And so the first graphic novel collection will get solicited to the direct market, just like everything else. And then it'll go to the book trade, just like everything else that we do, because we have Simon & Schuster for the book trade. And then the fourth window is that first volume of Berserker will ship to the Kickstarter fans.
That's amazing. So that's honestly what so many retailers, that's just what they've asked for at a minimum, is just like, give us a chance to sell your thing as trusted partners that we got you, we brung you to this dance. And
right.
Can you just give us a chance to do what we do best? And I'll bet you we'll sell you more units at a lower cost, probably overall, than any other channel. And there'll be more passion for it. And you've got dedicated showroom and dedicated fans and dedicated sellers who know only comics and know those products so well. Like, the direct market is such a valuable tool. And I'm just going to say that just that little adjustment that you make there of the shipping date, and quite frankly, kind of a brilliant realization that there's a different expectation of the window in what a Kickstarter person is ordering, how long they are willing to wait, and what is normal to wait, because they're used to, like you said, getting a page at a time over a year or whatever. So if you can utilize that, still work the other channels, still monetize every step in the way of the publishing of that, and also spread some of that wealth around to the retail channels, distribution channels, and everything else, doing God's work. Ross Richie, good stuff.
Thank you. And just to go in one level of detail, the lowest tier that you could buy in on was $50. And the first volume graphic novel is $15. And so the regular trade, okay, so it's a 3 trade buy-in because it's 12 issues. So each, just to break it down, 12 issues breaks into 4 issues per trade. So it's 3 trades, right? So 3 times $15. If you buy it at a comic shop, it's $45. Okay. And we offered the tier at $50. And the reason that we did that was to price protect the retailer, right? So you don't have a comic book fan going to go buy the product from Kickstarter because they're going to pay $5 more to buy all 3 volumes and shipping.
Yeah.
Right? They could, if they can go to their comic shop and they can pre-order.
It levels the playing field while still expanding the market, right? To those people who don't have a comic shop, who never would have seen this thing in the first place. I think
I was just talking to a lady on Instagram this morning who she bought through the Kickstarter. She's never bought a comic book before. She's a Kiana fan and she had questions about the project. And I was, answering her questions on Instagram, basically saying, this is how it works. And here's what you can expect. And here's when the product's going to ship. So, we were able to give these comics to people who've never read comics before.
And it goes further. It supports itself in the sense that, like, okay, I'm a retailer. I can get the issues now. Everybody else has to wait a year outside of this channel, right? You can get the issues right now and be in Keanu's story today and be following along with it. Not to mention, I have confidence, one, that this project's going to see completion. It's going to be completed. The issues are, if they're not in the can, they're funded. We know it's coming out.
Yep.
On the flip side of it, you could even offer the single issues as a perk level to buying the collection, which adds to the print run, and it all supports itself.
Well, I'll do you one better, Dan. What we're doing to support our retail partners in the direct market is that the week that the book is going to come out in direct market shops, we're going to take the email list that we got from Kickstarter. So every backer is going to get an email blast. And it's going to be, you ordered the graphic novel trilogy, and we're still shipping it to you, and you're going to get it. But if you don't want to wait, the first chapter is on sale.
That's right.
And here's where you can find it.
It's no different than I got to subscribe to HBO to get Game of Thrones first run, or I can wait and I can get the season at the end. It's right there. You're giving options and you're expanding the market, and you're not cutting off your partners at the knees. Mwah! Ross Richie, all right. You're doing that right. So, okay, this is why Regan, like, every once in a while, Regan reaches out to me and he goes, you gotta like really explain how good this is, because not everybody.
Thank you, Regan. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Well, I was talking to Card D'Angelo, who runs Earth 2, and we were in its Spirit of Ice Retailer Award winning shop here in Los Angeles. And
friend of Comic Book News.
Oh, great. Well, I love Car. And Car was saying, conceptually what we're doing is flipping the model. Typically somebody sells the graphic novel on Kickstarter and then they solicit it in the direct market.
Yeah.
And Car is like, that's the cart before the horse. What you did was you put the cart behind the horse, right? And it's like you sell it to the direct market first and then you sell it to the Kickstarter. So
why not? They don't care. They're not going to be missing it. They're going to it is apples and oranges, and maybe you'll get some conversion into the other markets. Some of those people can now have a channel to be directed into a great direct market store. And I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass, but like, because only great direct market stores are carrying any Boom books or anything outside of like the big mainstream too anyway. So
yeah, I mean, Larry from Larry's Comics was hitting me on social and saying that he already has civilians pre-ordering the book at his shop. So people are calling his shop.
I think Larry's banned from this channel, but that's all right. No big.
Okay. I don't know the background. Sorry.
I'm just kidding. We love Larry. In fact, we got a lot of people that love you, Ross. We got some questions here, if you don't mind. I got a couple questions from the audience we can go to.
Do it.
Back at the beginning, okay, here's We Got Issues says, Mr. Richie, with all due respect, in your opinion, why is it so hard for comic book companies to write an African-American male superhero book? Thanks for your reply.
Hey, We Got Issues. Thanks for the question. Look, I don't know. I've never worked at Marvel. I've never worked at DC. I worked at Malibu Comics 25 years ago. And they were bought by Marvel, but I never worked for Marvel directly. And, I think that, we don't publish superheroes. Once in Future and Something is Killing the Children, and we only find them when they're dead, and Seven Secrets and Buffy. And, I feel like to be able to properly critique Marvel and DC and sort of the perspective of what they are not measuring up on, I feel like to give you a better answer, I would have need to work there. So
okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I mean, it's like I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this: is that a hard line in the Boom sand that you would never publish a superhero comic?
Well, we have, but what we've done is like Mark Waid did Irredeemable, which was like a complete deconstruction.
Yes.
I mean, he basically took Superman and made him a villain and blew the whole thing up. And I mean, when I say blew the whole thing up, I mean, it was bananas. So like if we do superhero, I
forgot about that, but that's probably maybe my all-time favorite Boom book that I can think of off the top of my head. I really love that book.
Thank you.
Mark, friend of the show as well.
Yeah, Mark and Peter did an amazing job, but it's like, as a publisher, I don't focus on, I have a garage full of superheroes, and I think that's great. But like as a publisher, I want to go to where like Marvel and DC already do that.
Yeah, right.
I want to go to where the opportunity is, and so the opportunities around that.
And I can tell it's not coming from a place of snobbery or hate, right? It's just like this is your opportunity to do what somebody else is not doing, frankly. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh, man. Here's a very do you recognize this name? Do you know Elliot R. Brown?
Elliot R. Brown of the Marvel Universe Handbooks schematics.
You got it.
Did all the mechanicals.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And the official cartographer of Gotham City, and the creator of the Punisher Armory, if you ever read that book.
Right.
Also,
Punisher really wasn't my thing, but yeah, I recognize that.
Well, also creator and writer of Spitfire and the Troubleshooters, and a bunch of other. He did every single photo cover Marvel ever put out.
On Marvel Age, I remember those. Right. Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker with the, all of those. Punisher with the wedding cake, every single photo
Thank
cover.
you, Elliot.
And, well, you can thank him more by steering people here next week because he's going to be a guest on our show. He's a return guest. And we're diving deep into Punisher Armory. So come back next week. Thanks, Elliot.
Pew. That's Punisher, right? Pew, pew.
Oh, man. He's the greatest. A Punisher, I'm not even that big of a Punisher fan, per se, except for Punisher Armory. It's amazing. Have you ever read it?
I don't think so. I'm sorry.
Seek it out, pal. Amazing.
All right. But I love Elliot R. Brown.
I give the grandma an OnlyFans account named OnlyGrams and show art of her monster hunting. Not,
I love it. I love it.
One way to monetize, right?
That's not a misexplain. That's a good explain.
Boom was one of my favorite publishers. Really excited to hear this interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Boom has become one of my favorite studios. Oh, Justin Rogers, long time watcher. Strange Skies Over Berlin. Something is Killing the Children. 7 Secrets. Once and Future. So good. This guy knows. This is the guy that would always ask for these books, the books that this is a guy who pays attention to weird and interesting books out there.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. Thank you. Thank you for the love.
Oh, speaking of weird fans of the show, Coffee Breath, one of my favorite books on the shelf right now.
Thank you, Coffee Breath. I can relate to your Coffee Breath. I have Coffee Breath most every morning.
Oh my gosh, this guy was watching and commenting from a long time ago. Another fan, Mr. Dongs. Question for me. Do you feel there's a logistically viable path for comic retailers to stock their shelves with crowdfunded comics, or what steps would be needed to make that happen? I'm pretty sure that Mr. Richie just laid it out. Like what he said is unquestionably the best plan the simplest and best methodology I've heard of for kickstarted books to coexist with the direct market. I also like what I've seen in the arena of retailer tiers on Kickstarters that are buy X number of books and get them at least a 50% discount with free shipping. If you can get to 10 books, free ship, which is pretty standard in the book trade. Those are the kind of terms that would make a dent on Kickstarters, in my opinion, to retailers. You do that and you're talking. And then also, but it's the ship date problem is a little bit of the problem. But I think, Ross, you solved that problem with what you've laid out. Any thoughts on that? How do you feel about that? You got any retailer tiers on your Kickstarter?
No, I mean, we're very fortunate that we have a staff member, Morgan Perry, that her job is to take care of retailers. And so what we did was we generated an FAQ for the retailers when we announced this. And we had Morgan send it to everybody. And we basically said, look, if you want to buy the regular trades that are going to be available to you through Diamond, but you want to buy them through a Kickstarter, you can do that. I don't think you are going to want to, but you can. And if you need anything, Morgan's here for you 24/7. If you have any questions, if you have a, sort of, I need this, that, or the other, we'll make it available and, it can all ship. So, we just opened ourselves up and said, we're here for you. You just tell us what'll help.
Awesome. I find most publishers, most retailers don't realize that if you reach out to a publisher, you can buy direct from a publisher sometimes. You can get good terms.
For us, you can't, unfortunately. We're in a Diamond contract that prohibits that.
But you can certainly get support from publishers in the terms of getting signings maybe set up. You can reach out to them for collateral and information about their books and get involved with their social media. All right. First Boom comic I read was Abbott by Saladin Ahmed. Had a great African-American female lead. Not a superhero book, but
there we go.
Diversity. Love it.
Thank you, Comic Explain.
Here's one from a long time fan of the show, and oh man, industry mainstay, John Jackson Miller of Comicron.
John Jackson Miller, the great John Jackson Miller. Ross, as a publishing veteran in the 1990s, has the 2020 distributor shakeup feel to you in comparison to the one in 1995? I think they're completely different. I think that when Marvel bought Heroes World and put John, you'd know, but my recollection is Marvel was 35% of the market, putting it through a 15% pipe at that time. And the pipe broke, and there weren't computers, and phone lines could get overwhelmed, and we all know what happened. So, and I haven't seen the market break with the distributors shaking up so far. So
That's interesting.
I
think we can pivot faster in 2020 than we could in 1995 for sure.
Yeah.
So that an apples to apples comparison is probably not really feasible. I don't know.
I mean, look, the market burst. How many stores went out of business within 6 months in that period? I think it's in '96. Whereas, like, the market's up. Like Boom's sales are way up.
Right.
And comic shops, from what all the retailer forums I'm in, everybody's talking about, they have a better year this year than they did last year.
No, but don't you know the industry's dying, Ross, and Comic-Con. Let's tell John Jackson Miller how well comics are or aren't selling, right? This is the one guy. Right. Thank you, Johnny Jack.
Thank you, John. Love you, John.
What else we got? Not much else here, except I've read Punisher Armory. They're masterpieces in draftsmanship. They are that. But also the writing is the underreported part of that story, in my opinion. And we're going to go deep. I got them all. I got all of them. And we're going to put them on the $1 Million Comics cam. We're going to spread them out. I'm going to get all into them.
Punisher's the one that goes pew pew, right?
He is. And you look, Rod, I don't own a gun. I don't like guns. And neither does Elliot. He doesn't own a gun, not touched a gun in his life, but he researched them so lovingly. Every single thing in there is absolutely real and researched. He went to SWAT team conventions to write this book. Wow. He got in with the manufacturers, and then he also got inside of the mind of what Frank Castle would be like. Like, he's just a fan. Elliot R. Brown is a fan's fan. He's so great. Okay. And plus all that bullpen of 1980s, we're going to have an 80s bullpen reunion session, Marvel bullpen reunion session soon.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. Get Wheezy and Larry Hama, and
I'm working on it. You got a line on Jim Shooter for me? Can you get me into Jim Shooter's Rolodex?
Yeah, I can take care of you. I don't know Jim, but I know people who know Jim, so I'll help you.
Okay, we'll talk. Okay, last comment here.
Can I tell my Jim Shooter story?
Oh, heck yeah.
So the guy that I'm
nothing but time for Jim Shooter stories, by the way. If you do ever get a message, Jim Shooter, you just say that Dan Sheen will give the most worshipful revisionist history interview you'll ever see. I love Jim Shooter. I would say nothing but good things to his face.
Well, you're going to have fun when you talk to him. So this guy that I'm going to hook you up with. So at San Diego Comic-Con, they had just opened the Hilton Bayfront hotel. And it's a mainstay of the convention now.
Yeah.
But at the time, the convention had never had it before, and it was further away from the convention center. And it was sort of this weird, remote, nobody been in it, nobody knew about it. And that first year it was open, people that got booked in that hotel hated it because it was totally this new, crazy, weird thing. And so I get this text that Saturday, probably at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, from my buddy, and he says, "Hey, Jim Shooter is going to be at the hotel bar tonight." And I was like, I had never met Jim. And I want to say this is probably 2013 or 14. Could have been 2010. I don't know, somewhere in there. More than 5 years ago. And I went there at probably like 8 o'clock that night. And because nobody went to the Bayfront, it was empty. Just hard to even conceptualize with San Diego right now. And the bar was empty. And there was one person there. And it was Jim Shooter. And Jim posted up with his glass of wine. And he was sitting right at the bar so that he could get the refill. And I had Jim Shooter to myself. And I walked up and I said, Jim, you don't know who I am. My name's Ross Richie. I own a company that you probably never heard of and don't care anything about. Studios. Yeah. But I'm a comic book publisher and I'm a huge fan of yours. And I got a million questions for you. And I sat down at that bar and I probably talked to Jim Shooter for 4 hours. And I didn't share them with anybody. And I asked every single question. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge comic book history buff. And in particular, I am utterly fascinated by Jim Shooter's tenure about what he did with Marvel Comics. And I got every single answer. And he was terrific. He was kind. He was long-suffering. He dealt with every single fanboy question I had. And I had a gazillion of them. And I just had an absolute blast. And it's just like the very best thing. It was terrific.
That's awesome. That's the story I want to hear. That's not the story I was expecting to hear. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but that's not what I would expect.
Well, look, I know a lot of professionals that worked for Jim, and they characterized him as very hard to get along with and difficult, and they had a hard time with him. And I know a bunch of professionals that worked with him and enjoyed their time and, had positive things to say. So who knows what it is, and I have friends that I love and believe in on both sides of that equation.
I just love the Shooter story. The way he's like the youngest ever writer of DC Comics and stuff. Just that origin story of his is like, dude, he was a fan first and foremost, and so deeply into it and into the storytelling aspects of the medium long before I think that was really widely recognized, like the way you do storytelling on a comics page.
Well, here, Dan, this will be something you'll get a kick out of. So there's a little corner of Marvel history that I really enjoy. And so let's just do the homework here for a minute for your audience that doesn't know. So one of the things that's unique about Stan Lee, there's many things, but one of them was that he was the editor-in-chief while he was writing most of the books. And so fans tend to think of him as just the writer, but he was the editor-in-chief. He was hiring the artists and running everything.
True.
Okay. Now, when Cadence bought Marvel from Martin Goodman, Stan went from being the editor-in-chief to the publisher. And I actually asked Shooter about this, and Shooter gave me an answer that he felt that Stan was really tired because Stan had been writing all of the comics for about 25 years at that juncture. And then he was ready to take a break. So Stan becomes the publisher, and he brings in his protege, Roy Thomas, to become the editor-in-chief. Now, this is a creatively rich period of time for Marvel, where it's this period when Ghost Rider and Man-Thing and all these new...
The 70s, they did such a breakout of amazing new talent
Conan,
and stuff.
Roy did Conan. That was Roy's project. But by 1975-76, Roy stepped out of the editor-in-chief position. And there's a series of folks that step into that position. So Marv Wolfman became editor-in-chief. Lynn Wein became editor-in-chief. I think Jerry Conway told me that he was editor-in-chief for 2 months. And he quit because it was driving him crazy. And Archie Goodwin became editor-in-chief.
Jerry Conway deserves everything he gets for killing Gwen Stacy, so I don't get it.
Jerry Conway deserves his own 2-hour show about what a genius
he is. You're right. No, that was for my friend Steve Higgins. Sorry.
All right. So then there's, in Fantastic Four 176, the Fantastic Four fight their way into the Marvel offices. And they fight their way through. They're chasing the Impossible Man, okay? And they go by a door. And on the door, it says Marvel Editor-in-Chief. And it has Marv's name with crossed out, Lynn's name crossed out, Archie's name crossed out. And then it starts to write, Roy's name was crossed out. And then you see them go through everybody, and then at the bottom they're about to write Roy Thomas again. Okay, it's like half completed. So that's when Shooter came in, and Shooter comes in, and basically the first thing he does is he makes all these books ship on time.
Yeah.
And if you go back and you read your favorite series, they all had these fill-ins and reprints because everything was late. And so Jim gets the trains back on time. Star Wars is the book that saves Marvel Comics publishing. It makes them enough money to get them back on their feet. Jim creates the framework, and then you have this period of comic shop growth in the 80s, which allows them to do the Epic Comics line and, broadly diversify the kinds of series that they're publishing, and they are, insanely successful. So, and that really fosters, all the way up to when the guys leave for Image. Shooter cycles out, Tom DeFalco takes over, and then you're off to the races. It's a whole other era, but it's a fun little time period.
And then what he did, and to try what he tried, and all the things that he went out, and then what he did even after Marvel is like, man, I would love to just talk to that guy like you did, except in front of a few hundred people live on YouTube sometime soon.
Well, I'll see what I can do.
Okay, and I know he's like 6'9" or something, but he looms large just in my mind as like, gee, that guy's like 12 feet tall.
Just understand that there was a lady who saw me 2 weeks ago on the streets of Los Angeles, and she looked at me and said, "You look like Stone Cold Steve Austin." So understand, I am not small, right? And I've got a pair of shoulders, okay? And sitting next to Jim Shooter, I feel like I'm a 5-year-old.
No, totally. I'm not a small guy myself, and it's always funny when you meet somebody really tall, right? Like I'm 6'2" myself, and I went to work at this place, and we always just telecommuted, and then I got to meet like my boss for the first time, and I'm like, holy cow! Like everybody's gigantic. But in my mind, he's that towering in stature over Marvel Comics and over in comics in general. I love his commercial and artistic sense, and just, I don't know, he's a hero. We got one more comment from JJ. I think Heroes
we're closer to 10%. Yep, I have Boom up in my stats.
Boom up in the stats. JJ, we're gonna have you back in soon. Maybe towards the end of the year, we'll get our year-end wrap up. Maybe if Brian Hibbs is feeling up to it again, maybe we'll get him back in and we'll talk about it. He does the book scan numbers. JJ does the direct market, and we kind of cover the universe. Like we said, the universe it's growing, and COVID, if it's had winners and losers, right? And I think one of the winners, ironically, stores shut down, but people having so much time on their hands and the desire to like fill that time, a lot of them have started to discover comics.
I think that's true. And I would add, I think something that's unique about comic shops is that they're community centers. I've stood in a comic shop and I've had 2 fans approach me and say, we're having a discussion, who would win, Superman or the Hulk? And you work in comics, and we think that you can break the tie.
Nice.
And that doesn't happen to me at Starbucks, right? It doesn't happen to me. My wife doesn't care, right? Now, my wife loves comics. It's cool and everything, but she's not going to get into that kind of a discussion. And that's totally something that you can, you're not going to have that discussion at Barnes & Noble or, while you're ordering Amazon off of your computer. It's the only thing that comic shops do that uniquely.
This is so true. And the comics industry in particular, also, like you're a superstar luminary in the industry, Ross.
You're very kind. The creators are the stars.
No, I get it, but like the publishers are like the people behind the scenes that have to make it happen. It's the passion of the publishers and the people doing. Frankly, somebody who can be as successful as you've been in comics could be really successful, maybe more successful doing a lot of other things. So we're glad that you do comics, man.
Thank you. Well, I think the thing to just put a button on that COVID conversation, I think what fandom did is I think comic book fans supported their local shop because it was important to them. And they knew that all these stores are owned by mom and pop small operations, and they went to their store and they bought stuff. I saw it in our shops. So, I think it's a big thing how the comic book community stepped up and supported retailers.
No doubt. All right, Ross, anything else you want to plug? We want to make sure everyone goes to your YouTube site. They go to your Instagram. They check out your comic interviews, and they check out Boom's website. What did I miss?
You nailed it. The last thing I'll just hit is, just did this interview with James Tynan. I'll be putting up another piece at the Kieran Gillen interview today. And it's long and specific. And the idea is, if you're ever curious about what your favorite writers' influences are, we really get into what part of the country they're from. Poor Kieran Gillen, I don't know anything about England. And so I had him explain to me where, Birmingham, what the hell does that mean? And all that stuff, and break down for me the pathway. If you're curious about how to break into comics, these interviews are great for learning how my guests did it, and it might provide an inspiration to you. So at the end of the day, I hope they're a great resource, and I hope folks get something out of it. And if you do or you don't, let me know in the comments.
Great. And if you've got any more Boom projects to promote, or you got any of those creators that want to get out and spread the word around, why don't you point them over at old Danny, huh?
Sounds good, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. I gotta play you out here. We got to do our credits, make our money here, and play a little cameo at the end. I know I kind of got a hard stop. If you got time to stick around, you can. If not, I understand. We'll see you next time.
All right, brother.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Bye. Oh boy, Ross Richie. Wasn't that fun? I have several cameos like in the hopper, new cameos. I know I've been cheesing out on the closing credit cameos a little bit, but I've got several to choose from and I can't decide which one to do. Something that Ross said, though, made me, I think, decide which one. So anyway, thank you, folks, for watching the show. I think I'm slowing down a little bit here. What's going on? Thank you for watching the show. Thank you for sending me your comics. Oh, what comics? Where do you send them? Well, you can send them if you want your comics to be shown on the $1 Million Comics cam in the $1 Million mailbox. Send them to Comic Book News, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. Man, I'll take them. I'll spread them out on the $1 Million Comics cam. We'll take a look at them. I'll give you my unvarnished opinion. I will do what your friends and family will not. You know what I mean? You show them your comics and they're like, yeah, oh yeah, this is great, really wonderful stuff. Thanks. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you like it is, right? If it's good, I'm going to tell you. If it's not, I'll tell you that too. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing and liking or disliking or commenting, whatever, interacting. It's all engagement. That's what we're looking for. Oh, I got a couple more comments before we go. I'll play them during the credits. I want to thank everybody for watching. Oh man, next episode, we've got Elliot R. Brown. And I think we're going to focus on Punisher Armory. There's so much great Elliot R. Brown stuff to talk about. We did a wide-ranging interview. You can look at our lengthy, retrospective interview. But I want to dive deep on something that I think most people don't really dig or have not had a chance to dig, rather, or would dig if they had a chance to even see it. So we're going to check that out. And then the week after that, we got Ryan Claytor of Elephant Eater Comics and Coin Op Carnival. We reviewed that on a recent $1 Million mailbox, and it was fantastic. And then after that, who knows? I got more stuff, more guests than you can shake a stick at. And we will see you next time.
Cerebus is distributed across Canada, the United States, in England, he's in Australia, and the world seems to want him more than Dave wants to give him away, which is just fine.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the situation. It's Comic books are a great world. It's a very hidden world where it's a nice thing to be able to visit fame.
Yeah.
I can go to a comic book convention and get all of the things that fame provides.
And then leave it, and
leave
that's
it.
it.
Yeah, I go next door to the hotel to a donut shop. I'm not going to get a better table than anybody else. It's like, I'm Dave Sim. It's like, well, this guy ordered the orange cruller first. You want to just wait your turn.